In the last video, we talked about how blood flows through the heart, and it looked something like this, right? Talking about how the blood moves through the heart, how the heart pumps it to the rest of the body, how it oxygenates and deoxygenates, that whole process, right? But how does the heart keep itself alive? It has to be somewhat selfish, right? Because it is also made of tissues and muscle, and it has to keep itself alive by giving itself blood too. And that's where the coronary circulation comes in. This is the circulation of the heart giving itself blood. So it's just going to be a quick little video. You don't need to know too much about it. But let's talk about it, right? And again, you don't have to draw something super pretty to get the point across. So we're going to break it up into two parts. So let's just draw a line right here. We're going to talk about the arteries involved in coronary circulation, which is how the heart is giving oxygenated blood to itself. And then once the heart uses up the oxygen, we will talk about the veins involved and how it dumps it back into the whole system, right? So for arteries, let's draw a heart. And we don't need to draw the chambers in this case because we're just looking at the outside of the heart. We're looking at how blood is supplying oxygen to the heart tissue itself. Now remember that when we're looking at a heart from the front view, that this is the right, this is the left, because it's in terms of a patient. Okay, so you have two major arteries. You have a right coronary artery that looks something like this and comes down here, and there's another one here. And then you have a left coronary artery that has a branch this way and a branch down this way. That is the very first thing that I would draw when we're talking about the arteries involved with the coronary circulation. So let's label them as well. So this up here and this up here, before it even branches, this is the left coronary artery. And then right is going to be the right coronary artery before they even branch. Okay, so let's talk about the right coronary artery. It has two branches, and I drew it this way because this branch that comes down here and stays in the front, stays in anterior. This is known as the right, because it's on the right side, the right marginal artery. And then this other one, it starts out anterior, but then it's actually going to go posterior. So we'll draw it as a dotted line. So it's basically, if you think of this as a 3D image, it's wrapping around to the back. And this artery here that branches from the right coronary artery and then loops around to the back is known as the posterior interventricular. Oops, poor spacing, I'm sorry. Let's draw this one. This is the right marginal artery over here. And the posterior interventricular artery is the one that loops around posterior here. Okay, so it has two branches. Then you have the left coronary artery. It has two branches as well. This one is known as the circumflex artery, and this other one is known as the anterior interventricular artery, right? So in summary, the left coronary artery has two branches, the circumflex and the anterior interventricular. The right coronary artery has two branches as well, the right marginal artery and the posterior interventricular artery. So recall that this is how oxygenated blood is actually supplying the heart itself. So like the circumflex artery is going to supply the tissue and the muscle around the left atrium up here. Similarly, this branch down here, the marginal artery, is going to supply this right ventricular area where that muscle and tissue is there. Once the heart has used up this oxygenated blood, it needs a way to get rid of it, to take it back to the heart to then get reoxygenated, right? So this is where the veins come into play. So let's draw another heart that looks like this in a similar fashion, okay? There is one vein that I like to draw like this. This is known as the great cardiac vein. The great cardiac vein. There's another one over here. This is the small cardiac vein. Right? And then there's also another vein but it's on the posterior side, so we'll draw it as like a dotted line. Okay? This is the middle cardiac vein, which kind of makes sense because it's in the middle, but it is posterior, so we'll draw it dotted. All three of these dump into what's known as the coronary sinus, and it looks like this big kind of pool, like this really big artery, and vein in the back, in the posterior part of the heart. So all three of these are going to collect the deoxygenated blood and just dump it here into this coronary sinus. Now, this should sound familiar. Why? Because if you remember in the other video, we learned that three things dump deoxygenated blood into the right atrium to then get put back in the cycle to be reoxygenated. The superior and inferior vena cava and the coronary sinus, right? Which we drew as a star. We couldn't see it because the coronary sinus is on the posterior part of the heart and it's collecting deoxygenated blood from the great, the small, and the middle cardiac vein. It's dumping it into this pool, and then it's going to dump it back here into this right atrium. Right? So this is both the arteries and veins involved with how does the heart kind of prioritize itself? How does it keep itself alive by giving itself oxygenated blood and then also taking away